Dust doesn't scream. It just gets into everything, your lungs, your eyes, the seams of your armor, until you stop noticing it's there at all. That's the first thing the quiet hand ever taught me. Not how to kill, how to disappear into something ordinary until the moment you're not ordinary anymore. The target tonight is simple. The Warden of the Last Well. Kill him. Take the Wellheart he carries. Return to Sable. Simple. I was built for simple. I should explain the quiet hand, though explaining was never a skill they bothered teaching me. They take children from the dust towns, the ones nobody counts twice, orphans of the hush storms, kids whose parents didn't come back from a water run gone wrong. They don't give you a name when they take you. They give you a function instead. Knife. Ghost. Silence. Wren, in my case, because the handler who found me said I moved like something small and unbothered by the size of the world trying to crush it. I've been Wren longer than I was ever anything else. Long enough that the name before it doesn't exist anymore, not even as a shape I can almost remember. They train you in the bone pits first, where the wind carries grit sharp enough to open skin if you don't learn to read it coming. Then the underflats, the flooded ruins beneath the old cities, where the dark and the damp teach you that fear is just unfamiliarity with better lighting. Then finally the work. Small contracts first, then larger, until the day Sable hands you a name and a location like it's the most natural transaction in the world. By then, to you, it is. Nobody at the Quiet Hand counts their marks. Sable always said counting makes you sentimental, and sentimental hands shake. So I don't count. I move from contract to contract the way dust moves across the ashlands, not because it wants to, but because stillness isn't really an option out here. The last well should have been like every other contract. A name, a location, a core to retrieve. Nothing about it should have been different. The approach takes 6 hours across open flat, moving low between wrecked transport husks left over from whatever war made the ashlands what they are. Nobody remembers which war. There have been enough of them since that the first one stopped mattering the way individual grains of sand stop mattering once you're standing in a dune. By the time I reach the sanctuary walls, there's already fighting inside. Reaper raiders. Scavenger crews who've learned that sanctuaries like the Last Well are worth more than any water run, because sanctuaries like this one don't just hold water. They hold a warden, and a warden means a Wellheart, and a Wellheart means you never have to fear the hush again. Not for a generation. They've breached the outer gate already. I can hear it from the ridge, screaming that isn't dust carried, metal on stone, the particular percussion of people dying in a place that was supposed to be safe. Doesn't matter to me why they're here. They want the same thing I do. That just means less standing between me and the contract. I drop the grapple line and go in. The sanctuary was beautiful once, in the specific way that things built by people who still believed in beauty tend to be. Carved water channels run along the inner walls, dry now except for a thin trickle at the bottom, catching what little the warden's work still manages to purify. Faded murals cover what's left of the ceiling, hands cupped around water, water cupped around a heart, the same image repeated in a dozen styles by a dozen different hands over what must have been generations. I don't stop to look at any of it longer than function requires. I move through the outer courtyard and the Reaper crew scattered across it, barely register me as a threat until I'm already past them, which is exactly how the Quiet Hand trained me to prefer it. The inner keep is worse. A handful of sanctuary guards, robed, lightly armed, clearly never meant for actual combat, hold a stairwell against a Reaper push that outnumbers them badly. They're already bleeding. Some of them are bleeding out. They see me. One of them, an old woman with a spear held in hands too unsteady to use it properly, plants herself directly in my path anyway. I don't have time for this. I go through her position the way water finds the lowest gap in a wall. Not cruelly, just completely because cruelty would require caring one way or the other, and I've never been built for either. The stairwell gives. Beyond it, the inner sanctum, and him. I don't get a good look at the warden before the ceiling comes down. That's the last clear thing I remember. A support pillar giving way somewhere above, whether from Reaper demolition charges or simple age. and half the sanctuary's upper level folding inward in a slow-motion collapse of stone and dust that swallows the room whole. I go down with it, weightless and choking, and then, abruptly, nothing. Pain wakes me first. It always does. Pain means you're still functioning. Above me, open sky, the particular bruised orange of an ashland's dusk. Beneath me, sand, not sanctuary stone, something looser, older, still holding the day's heat. Ground. I don't know how far I was carried by the collapse, or how long I was out, or whether the sanctuary still stands at all behind me. Questions for later, if there is a later. I turn my head. He's kneeling beside me. His hands are pressed flat against the wound along my side, and there's a soft blue-white light gathered under his palms, sinking into torn flesh like water finding cracked earth. He's healing me. He notices my eyes are open and goes very still, the way prey goes still when it realizes it's already been seen. He doesn't retreat immediately. I think retreat isn't fully available to him yet, not while his hands are still working. But I can feel the tension come into his shoulders, the readiness to bolt the second his work is finished. He's older than I expected, though not by much. Enough years to have earned the weathering along his face, not so many that it slowed his hands any. His robes, what's left of them, are the same faded sanctuary blue as the murals overhead, torn in a dozen places from the collapse. His eyes, even now exhausted and wary, hold something steady that hasn't broken, even though everything visible around it clearly has. He's spent. I can see it in the fine tremor working through his forearms, the way his breath comes short and uneven. Then his eyes lose focus and he folds sideways into the sand beside me. Unconscious. I get up. It costs more than it should. The wound protests every inch of movement, but I've carried worse across longer distances. I walk toward him. He's helpless, completely open. I draw one blade. The metal catches the last orange light of the dying day. This is simple. I finish the contract here, take the Wellheart, return to Sable, simple. I raise the blade. Something stops me. It isn't mercy. I don't have a word for what it actually is. I only know that my hand refuses the motion, and the longer it refuses, the less certain I become that it's ever going to comply again. He saved me. He had every reason to let me die in that sand. He almost certainly recognized the quiet hand markings on my gear, knew exactly what I'd come to do. And instead he knelt over an enemy who'd come to kill him and burned through the last of his strength, keeping that enemy breathing. That doesn't compute. Sable never trained me an answer for that particular equation. She trained me 100 ways to end a life, and not one way to understand why someone would spend the last of theirs preserving one that had arrived specifically to take everything from them. I sheath the blade instead and look around. A shallow basin between two rock formations, sheltered from the worst of the wind. No sign of the sanctuary, no sign of pursuit, no sign of anyone else at all. For now, whatever this is, we're alone in it. I leave him where he's fallen and go to check the perimeter. The basin is small, maybe half a kilometer across, ringed by weathered rock on 3 sides and open flat on the 4th. There's a seep spring at the low point, barely more than damp sand, but enough, if managed carefully, to keep 2 people alive for a while. No reaper sign. No husk sign either, which matters more. The corrupted things that wander deep Ashland's territory are worse company than any human raiding party. I return before full dark. He's still down, though his breathing has evened out. I build a fire a deliberate distance away, near enough for warmth, far enough that I'm not looming, and I sit. And for the first time since I can remember, I have nothing that needs killing in front of me. That night faces surface in the firelight that aren't really there. Every contract I've ever closed, I don't have a number for them. Sable always said counting makes the hand unsteady, so I never counted. And now, sitting in a stranger's basin under a sky full of dust-dimmed stars, I find myself trying anyway, and failing. And the failing sits in my chest like something with weight and edges. I have spent my whole life being useful in exactly one direction. Tonight, for the first time, something in that direction bends. I don't know what to call it. I only know it aches low, somewhere behind the wound he spent himself closing. He wakes fully the next morning. I hear it before I see it, a sharp breath, the scrape of someone pushing upright too fast for their own strength. By the time I turn, he's already braced against the rock wall, watching me with the particular stillness of someone deciding whether moving will make things better or worse. Fair. I am exactly the kind of thing that stillness is built to survive. I don't close the distance. I've learned somewhere in the last day without meaning to learn it that closing distance only makes things worse. Instead, I go back to what I was doing. Checking the fire, rationing what little food I salvaged from my gear, and I let my presence be as unremarkable as something built entirely for remarkable violence can manage. He doesn't speak, not that first day. He watches from across the basin, moves when I move, keeps the rock formations between us like a man keeping cover between himself and weather he can't predict. I let him. I have nothing to offer that would help, and offering things has never been part of my training. By the third day, the distance has shrunk without either of us agreeing to it out loud. He sits nearer the fire. I find a second ration and set it down without handing it to him directly, leaving it where he can take it without coming near me. He takes it. By the fifth night, we've settled into something that isn't trust exactly, but isn't the raw fear of that first morning either. I manage water from the seep spring. He identifies which of the scrub plants nearby aren't toxic, which surprised me. Apparently, sanctuary training includes more than just the Wellheart work. Neither of us discusses what I came here to do, or what the sanctuary's fall likely cost him. Some silences are a kind of mercy. This is one of them, for now. He teaches me that first week, the word his people use for the seep spring water once it's been purified. Not by his hands, just a word. Offered the way you offer something small, when you don't yet trust yourself with anything larger. I don't teach him anything back. I don't know how to teach. I only know how to end things. But he watches how I move, how my hand drifts toward a blade hilt at every unfamiliar sound, and I think, somewhere in that watching, he starts to understand me anyway, better than my words would ever manage. That night I watch the fire and understand something uncomfortable. I don't want to finish the contract anymore. Something in me is shifting, and I don't know whether I can stop it, or whether I want to. The days that follow settle into something almost gentle, in the specific, careful way that anything can be gentle out in the ashlands. We build a rhythm neither of us designs on purpose. Mornings, I check the perimeter and manage the water. He tends to what few scrub plants the basin supports, coaxing more out of them than I'd have thought the soil capable of giving. Afternoons, we work on a sand sled from salvaged sanctuary debris, because even in this strange, borrowed piece, we both know it can't hold forever. Evenings, the fire, the quiet, the slow, deliberate unlearning of what we were built to be to each other only days before. He tells me in pieces about the last well, not directly, never directly, but in the shape of what he avoids saying. The way he goes still when the wind shifts a certain direction, the one the collapse came from. The way his hand sometimes finds a spot low on his chest, like he's checking for something that isn't there anymore. I don't ask. I've learned enough, in this short stretch of life outside my function, to know some wounds don't want questions. They want time and quiet, and someone willing to sit near them without demanding either. In turn, without quite meaning to, I let something slip too. The deliberate, repetitive way I clean and re-clean my blades each night, long after they need it. He watches the ritual 3 evenings running before he finally speaks about it. "You don't have to do that here," he says. His voice has settled into something warmer over the week, easier around the edges. "Nobody's coming." "Someone's always coming," I say. It's the truest thing I know. He doesn't argue the point. He just watches the fire a while longer before adding quietly, "Not yet, though. Not tonight." I let the blade rest a beat longer than usual before I finish. Then the wind changes and the husks come with it. We hear them before we see them, a low, wrong keening carried in on the evening gusts, the sound corrupted things make when the hush has been in them long enough to hollow out whatever they used to be. I don't know how they found the basin. Maybe the Wellheart's presence carries further than either of us realized. Maybe the sanctuary's fall simply scattered enough of the region's husk population that finding us was only a matter of time. Whatever the reason, they come across the open flat in a ragged line, shapes that used to be people, moving with the particular stiff urgency of something driven by hunger it can't remember the origin of. I put myself between him and the line without deciding to. My body just goes there. It's a longer fight than it should be, because I'm not fighting to finish a contract anymore. I'm fighting to keep something alive, and that changes everything about how a body moves through violence. Slower in places, more reckless in others, because there's a shape of failure now that matters more than my own continued function. I lose count of how many go down. A dozen, maybe more, small mercy that they come in a size a single blade can still manage. But there are more behind them, and somewhere in the press of it, a husk's ruined hand finds the old wound along my ribs and tears it open fresh, deeper than before. By the time the last of them falls or scatters or simply loses the thread of whatever hunger drove it here, I'm on my knees in the sand, and the world is bleeding out at the edges into something soft and formless. Dust settles over both of us, of course it does. I hear him before I understand the sound is for me, not for himself. For what I am, for what I've done in whatever life came before this basin, and now, apparently, for what I'm about to stop being. The woman who came to kill him, the woman who put herself between him and a husk line instead, and now that same woman is bleeding out in his basin, and something in that particular arc seems to strike him as unbearable in a way that grief for a stranger usually wouldn't. The irony isn't lost on me either, even fading in and out the way I am. His hands find the wound. That blue-white light again, brighter than before, more urgent. His voice shakes while he works, fraying at the edges, but it isn't enough. Not this time. The wound runs too deep, and he's already spent so much of himself these past days keeping the two of us fed and watered that there's simply not enough reserve left to close something this severe. I can't hold it. His voice cracks fully on the last word, and something in the admission seems to cost him more than the healing itself. I manage something that isn't quite a laugh, more breath than sound. It isn't the reaction either of us expected from someone dying in the sand, but there's something almost gentle in the absurdity of it, that after everything, the last new thing I learn is the particular sound of his voice breaking on my account. I don't remember losing consciousness. I remember the Wellheart, afterward, not in his hands anymore, not in whatever vessel his people kept it in, but inside me, settled somewhere behind my sternum, pulsing with a rhythm that isn't quite my heartbeat and isn't quite separate from it either. I don't know exactly when it happened. Sometime during the collapse, maybe, or sometime during those first desperate hours he spent keeping me breathing. Wherever it came from, it's mine now. Or I'm its in some way neither the Quiet Hand's training nor his sanctuary's teachings ever prepared either of us to expect. I wake to find it there. Warm. Present. Humming faintly like it recognizes something in me it wasn't built to expect. He's still beside me, hollowed out with exhaustion, watching me with eyes that have stopped shaking but still carry the full weight of a fallen sanctuary in them. Whatever he did in that last desperate push, whether it was healing in the ordinary sense or something stranger, something that moved the Wellheart itself rather than simply closing a wound, it worked. I'm alive. I don't fully understand the mechanism, and I don't think he does either. I don't cry. I was never taught how, but I lift my hand, it costs effort, trembling with muscles convinced they were finished working for the day, and I brush his jaw gently. It's the first time in my life I've touched anyone with anything other than intent to end them. I didn't know the motion was still in me somewhere. I'm fairly sure the Quiet Hand never put it there in the first place, which means, whatever this is, it isn't training. It's something newer. He closes his eyes. Doesn't speak. Neither do I. Some moments don't need language, and after what the last stretch has cost both of us, this feels like exactly one of them. The sand sled we'd built from salvage and stubbornness carries steady across open flat by the time either of us has the strength to move it. The wind, for once, has gone quiet. We make it to a dry ravine 2 days out, further from the basin, Closer, I suspect, to whatever roots the quiet hand would use if they'd started to suspect I was still breathing. He rests, worn past the point of argument, curled in the shade of an overhang while the worst of the midday heat passes. I leave him to it and go looking for anything useful, because the body doesn't much care about grief or recovery. It only cares about the next thing it needs to keep functioning. Cracked rock, sparse brush, a mineral seep further down the ravine that might, with effort, be coaxed into something drinkable. Enough to manage, if not comfortably. I trap a lizard against the rocks. Not much, but something. I build a small fire and cook it in the day's fading heat, and for a while there's nothing in the world except the plain, ordinary work of staying alive, which after everything starts to feel close to peace. A voice behind me begins skinning a second one. I don't startle. I'd know that voice anywhere. Years of shaping carved into a body don't vanish just because the mind wearing that body has quietly started to change underneath it. Sable is crouched on the rocks above like she hasn't just tracked me across half the ashlands to find me. Dust gray coat, unarmed as far as I can see, though I know better than to trust appearances from her. She taught me most of what I know about hiding a blade in plain sight. She doesn't ask what happened out at the sanctuary, doesn't ask about the contract. She just watches, the way she always watched, back when I was small enough to be entirely shaped by that watching. No question about what happened. Somehow the silence is worse than any question would have been. I sit, finish the second lizard, set it near her without handing it over. We eat without speaking, the same ritual we shared 100 times during training, when words were a currency Sable taught me to spend as rarely as possible. It's strange, sharing this fire with her now, the same old rhythm, with everything underneath it entirely rearranged. Sable never speaks without reason. I know that the way I know the weight of my own blade. So I wait. Finally, she speaks. The core's inside you. I nod. No point denying it. She's likely sensed it the moment she arrived, the way I sense a blade's balance without needing to check it. Half the contract's done then. She tilts her head toward the overhang, toward where he still rests. Finish it. Take the rest. Come home. Simple. I shake my head. One word. Flat. No hesitation behind it. No. She studies me a long while. Not surprise. I don't think surprise was ever part of what the quiet hand built into her either. Something more complicated moves across her face instead. Something I don't have a name for. The same absence of a name I felt back on that first morning when my blade refused to move. I stand, draw both blades, point them at her. First time in my life I've raised a weapon toward my own handler. She doesn't flinch. I see disappointment in her eyes, plain and unmistakable. And underneath it, something else. Something that might, against every expectation, be satisfaction. She rises slowly, draws her own twin blades, forged in the same fires that made mine, taught to the same hands that once shaped my own from nothing. Real work, then. A thin, tired, almost smile crosses her face. The closest thing to warmth I think I've ever seen from her. Let's see what you've become, Ren. I don't correct her on the name. Maybe it's still mine. Maybe it isn't anymore. I haven't decided. We fight across the ravine floor until the light goes long and orange and the heat finally starts to break. She's faster than I remember, or maybe I've simply forgotten how fast she really is, the way a body forgets pain once it's passed through it. I'm angrier than I expected to be, not really at her, but at everything the quiet hand ever built me to be. Everything I never chose. Still fighting to reassert itself in my own hands even now. Twice she nearly finishes it clean. Twice I find a way through anyway, some instinct that isn't quiet hand training at all guiding the blade at the last possible moment. I don't know where it comes from. I don't ask. Finally she stops, lowers her weapon, studies me. When I pulled you out of that dust town, your eyes were empty. She takes a step closer, unafraid, the way only someone who trained you from nothing can afford to be. I see something in them now. Another step. I didn't put that there. She sheathes her blades, turns, and walks back toward the ravine's edge, unhurried, like the outcome had never really been in doubt. Before she disappears over the rise, without looking back, she says one thing. They'll send more. It won't be me next time, and I won't be able to soften what comes for either of you. Then she's gone, over the rise and out of sight, and I don't go after her. He wakes not long after. He's heard enough of it, I think, judging by the way he doesn't ask what happened, just comes to stand beside me, studying my face in the dying light. Do you regret it? His voice is careful, quiet, like he's bracing for whichever answer comes. I look at him, at the ravine behind him, at the wide, dust-colored world beyond that, at everything that used to mean nothing to me beyond a name and a location and a core to retrieve. No. He looks out toward the horizon instead, something in his posture straightening, like a decision he's been circling for days has finally landed. Then I need to go back to the well. A pause. The evening wind picks up, carrying grit and the mineral smell of the seep further down the ravine. There are people still bound to that ground. My people. I'm the only one left who can call them properly home. I nod. I understand what he isn't saying outright. The dead of the last well are still waiting, scattered through whatever's left of the sanctuary, and there's no one else living who knows how to gather them. Then we go, I say. We finish the sand sled and set out toward the last well, toward the place where he lost everything, and toward whatever Sable's warning means for what's still coming. We travel 2 full days and a night to reach it. The land grows quieter the closer we get. Not peaceful quiet, something heavier, like the ashlands themselves are holding something back out of old habit. The sanctuary comes into view at dusk on the second day. What used to be a walled settlement built into and around a natural spring, now mostly rubble. Some sections of wall still stand, stubborn against everything that's tried to bring them down. Others have collapsed entirely, spilling carved stone across the flat like something spat out by the ground itself. We approach on foot from a half-kilometer out, leaving the sled behind. My boots find broken paving, cracked but solid enough to hold weight, protesting under it anyway, like it resents being asked to bear anything more after everything else it's already lost. The quiet here is heavy, pressing. No wind moves through the ruined courtyards, just stillness, the kind that sits against the ears like depth pressure. We move through the wreckage together, old bloodstains gone black along what's left of the walls, claw and blade marks scored deep into the stone, deep enough that whatever tore through here did it with a fury that didn't stop to check whether the job was finished. Bones scattered through the rubble, some large, some small enough that I make myself not look too closely. He walks past all of it without a glance. Doesn't look at the bones. Doesn't look at the stains. Walks straight for the center of the ruined sanctuary, drawn there by something I can't see but can feel. Faint, echoing off the Wellheart, still settled behind my ribs. There's a basin there, mostly intact despite everything around it. The original spring source. Dry now, but clearly still holding whatever significance it always held. He kneels at its edge, presses both palms flat against the cracked stone, closes his eyes, and begins a low, wordless sound. It isn't song. It isn't quite language either. Something older than both. A call, reaching for whatever's still listening. Faint lights begin gathering around the basin's edge. One, then another, then more. Translucent shapes barely visible against the darkening sky, drawn in slow from every direction like something finally allowed to stop wandering. Everything left of his people, slowly, one by one. They gather into his open palm, drifting across his skin like captured light, given just enough weight to matter. Dozens of them. More than I expected this small, broken sanctuary could still be holding after everything that happened here. The Wellheart in my chest beats harder, faster, falling into rhythm with the gathered lights. I can feel it recognizing its own, like some part of it has been waiting this whole time for exactly this basin, exactly this moment. He opens his eyes, looks at me, palm full of light, hands trembling slightly under the weight of everything they're holding. They're all accounted for. His voice is quiet but sure, more certain than I've heard him sound since the day I woke bleeding in his basin. I scan the horizon instead of answering right away. The sky beyond the ruined wall is darkening in a way that has nothing to do with the hour. A low shape moving across the flat, wide and deliberate. Exactly the kind of thing Sable's warning promised. "The rest are here," I say. He nods. Doesn't say anything else. Doesn't need to. I draw my blades. We wait together on the last piece of ground either of us has left to defend. They come in numbers I stop tracking almost immediately. A Reaper warband first, drawn back by the same core signature that brought them here the first time, and behind them, worse, a husk swarm stirred up and driven forward by whatever corrupted intelligence still passes for leadership among them out here. I plant myself between the wave and the basin, between the wave and him, between the wave and every fragile gathered light held trembling in one open palm that can't defend itself. The fight that follows is the longest of my life, longer than anything the quiet hand ever built into me, because every fight before this one was function, and this one is choice. And choice, it turns out, weighs more going into a fight than any blade does. I lose my main blade early, snapped clean against a Reaper's improvised shield on the third exchange, and don't stop to mourn it. Just switch to the shorter backup at my hip and keep moving. I lose ground too, pushed back step by step toward the basin I'm trying to hold, until my heels find the edge of the stone and there's nowhere left to give. I don't move from that spot after that. Moving means losing what's behind me, and somewhere in the last stretch of days, without ever formally deciding it, I've settled on preferring to fall here rather than live having failed to hold it. The Reaper warlord comes for him directly near the end, when I'm bleeding from too many places to count and barely keeping the shorter blade level. I put myself in the path instead, one last time, and drive everything I have left up under the guard and through. He goes down. What's left of the warband breaks without him, scattering back into the dust they came from, and this time they don't reform. Quiet returns to the ruined sanctuary. Real quiet this time. Earned, at a cost. I'm only starting to feel now that there's nothing left in front of me to fight. I go down to one knee. The Wellheart is beating in time with the light still cradled in his palm, calling to each other across the last small distance between them. A distance, I understand now, about to close for good. He kneels in front of me, free hand pressed to the worst of the damage, that blue-white light flickering weaker than before. He's spent nearly everything he has, between healing me twice and calling his people home in the same handful of days. There isn't much reserve left to draw on. Stay. Just the one word. The same one he taught me days ago, back when I didn't understand why it needed to come first. I understand now. I've watched a great many things fall in front of me across a life I was never taught to count the true cost of. I never expected that someday I'd be the one setting my own blade down at the end of it, or that setting it down would feel less like losing, and more like the first honest thing I've done with these hands. The wind finally has gone still. The lights in his palm settle slow into something calmer, closer to rest than to searching. Whatever they were waiting for, I think they found it. I think in some way I still don't have the right words for, so have I. We stay at the last well 3 more days, doing what small repair the ruins will allow, though most of it can't really be repaired. Some places are meant to become memory instead of structure, and I think the well made that transition somewhere in the fighting, whether either of us willed it or not. On the 4th morning at first light, he releases the last of the gathered lights out across the dry basin, a quiet rite with no witness but me, and something in the ground itself seems to settle afterward, like a held breath finally allowed out. We don't go back toward Quiet Hand territory. We don't go anywhere they'd think to search first, not for a good while yet. Somewhere out past the last mapped ravines, past the reach of old contracts and older names, there's a stretch of ground with a seep worth managing and scrub worth coaxing into something useful, and for now that's enough. For now, simple means something different than it used to mean. I still clean my blades most nights. Some habits don't leave easily, and I've stopped fighting to force them out. But I finish faster now than I used to, and afterward, more often than not, I sit by the fire instead of standing watch over it. And he sits beside me, and neither of us needs to fill the quiet with anything at all. Sometimes in the quiet after the fire's mostly burned down, he asks me about the quiet hand. Not accusingly, just curious, the way you'd ask about weather in a country you never plan to visit. I tell him what I can. That the bone pits taught patience the hard way. That the underflats taught fear could be worn like a second skin instead of felt like a weakness worth hiding. That nobody ever taught me a proper word for what I feel now, sitting across a low fire from someone who chose twice to spend himself keeping alive a life that had come to end his. He says his people had a word for it. He teaches it to me on the 6th night after the well, slow, syllable by syllable, patient with my clumsy attempts at his language the same way I was once patient teaching him the little of mine he picked up, back when patience was the only currency either of us had left to spend. I don't say the word often. Some things lose their weight if you spend them too freely. But I keep it. The way I keep the Wellheart still beating quiet behind my ribs. The way I keep the memory of a blade that refused to move on a morning that rearranged everything that came after it. Somewhere out there, Sable is still watching, still waiting for the quiet hand to decide what comes next. I don't know when that reckoning arrives. I only know it isn't tonight. Tonight there's the fire and the settled dust and a stretch of ground that doesn't appear on any map I was ever trained to read. Tonight that's enough.